All right, so back before the world went to hell and everything you saw on social media was some post about how everyone's cheating us and we're all going to die, the social media landscape had other things people were complaining about, politics mostly. But a little while back, I remember seeing a little bit of a trend, 3-4 people, nothing major. But it seemed like what was sticking in their craw is that they were making another Fast and the Furious movie, which would bring the total of that series to 9, and if you count the Hobbs and Shaw spinoff, 10. And I can't say I completely disagree. I am not a fan of the series. I thought Hobbs and Shaw was a lot of fun, but the series as a whole, I don't really care for. But I saw a lot of people with why are they making another Fast and Furious movie? Well, the answer to that is very simple, folks. I don't know, why are you even asking? Why are they making another Fast and Furious movie? Number one, they're cheap. Relatively speaking, I know all those cars and car crashes aren't free, but relatively speaking to some of the other blockbusters out there, they're cheap to make. They, pardon the pun, but they can make them fast. They can pump one out every year to 2 years. And they are a reliable moneymaker. They have a built-in audience. And also, let's face it, what the hell else is Vin Diesel gonna do? Anyway, but what got me is people kind of acting like this is a new thing for Hollywood, and it's not. They've been doing this since the golden era. People tend to think that sequels are a modern invention, and they are not by any stretch of the imagination. Just because every movie back in the day didn't generate a sequel like the ones today didn't mean that there weren't films that had follow-ups. The Thin Man is probably the most famous. There's at least 6 in that series. I believe 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly. Charlie Chan, I don't know how many it had, but it had enough that they changed actors at least once. The Andy Hardy series is probably the most famous. Tons of them in there with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. And made for the same reasons. You could pop them out fast. And again, back then, you could make a movie in, depending on how stern your director was, 2 weeks, maybe 3. They didn't require a lot. 1, 2 locations, a couple dance numbers if you were doing an Andy Hardy. And they had a built-in audience. And a lot of them started out, not so much the Thin Man, but a lot of these ones with, multiple features started out as B-roll films. You'd go see a double feature. It'd be the first movie you'd see. You'd get the cartoon, the newsreel, and then you'd get, the main attraction. Okay? So there were a lot of these series, films that generated many, many, many sequels. And made a lot of money for the studios and made the stars of them pretty big names. But as time has kind of gone on, a lot of those films have kind of fallen by the wayside. And that is the subject of what we're going to be looking at today. We are going to be looking at the Maisie series, starring Ann Sothern from MGM, going from 1939 to 1947. So for the first time ever, I'm going to try to talk to you not about one film, but about 10. Yeah, they popped out 10 of these. Usually, 1 or 2 a year. Okay? So let's just dive right in. There's a lot to talk about. So the Maisie series focuses on the title character of Maisie Revere, who is she's a plucky, I don't know quite how to describe her. I don't want to use this strong, independent woman kind of thing, but I guess she's what you would call back then, she's a tough cookie. She doesn't take any guff. She's street smart. She's a performer. She's in show business. They never quite say what. She's kind of a jack of all trades in show business. She'll do anything that pays, basically. And in all the movies kind of have the same basic pattern. Usually Maisie is looking for a job, or she's just left a job or gotten fired from a job, or a job has abandoned her. Wherever it is, she's stuck somewhere or on her way somewhere with really nothing to her name but her suitcase. And that usually lands her wherever she's at. Usually lands her right smack dab in the middle of someone else's problems or issues, which she then gets swept up in. These issues usually involve some guy that at first can't stand her, and the two of them trade barbs back and forth. And eventually, in the end, Maisie, as one of the titles of the films is, Maisie gets her man. Okay? They're romantic comedy movies. They're the early progenitors of the romantic comedy. So a couple things interesting about this, the setup of these films. And you also got to understand it's kind of the setup of comedies back in the day. First off, in a lot of them, with the exception of the first one and a lot of the early ones, Maisie is really not the main character. She's the title character, but she's not the one the plot revolves around. She's kind of an observer to the plot. The other characters already have backstory and complications and whatnot that they're trying to work through, and she kind of lands in the middle of it, observes it, comments on it, and pushes people to do the right thing. Which is not, again, uncommon for the time. You look at Abbott and Costello movies, which I'm a huge fan of, and in a lot of those, they're not the main characters of the story either. They usually have some kind of boring boy-girl romance going on in a subplot that actually moves the story, for whatever it is, forward, leaving the comedian free to, basically be funny. Think Jack Sparrow in the original Pirates of the Caribbean, as relates to Will and Elizabeth. So that's always kind of interesting. As the films went on, Maisie kind of became more focused in the story, and the stories became more about her. But for the most part, yeah, she's kind of an observer. Secondly, and I think this is one of the strengths in how they made so many of these, is just due to kind of the flexibility of the character. These films kind of span a wide range of genres. Like, they could have Maisie do basically anything in any kind of movie. The very first one, simply called Maisie, is kind of a cowboy picture. She ends up on a ranch. And while it's not like a John Wayne cowboy picture, she's surrounded by cowboys and guys named Curly and Slim and the like. They did Ringside Maisie, which was a boxing film. Swing Shift Maisie, which dealt with the war. The last one in the series, Undercover Maisie, was a crime film. So they were able to kind of move her into all these different genres, which is, again, the fun of those old-time comedians, because that's what a lot of their films were. That's why they made so many of them, is they were just saying, hey, what if so-and-so in a cowboy movie? What if so-and-so in a horror movie? And, let them react. They never did a horror movie with her. That's kind of strange now that I think about it. There isn't one like Maisie Goes A-Haunting or something like that, which now I'm kind of mad. I wish they'd done that. That would have been fun. But anyway, so these stories, again, were not the strongest. Actually, I'll take that back. There were some pretty interesting and complex stories going on, but the pattern of the film was the same each time. So then what brought people back? Well, to answer that, you just got to look at the title character. You got to look at Maisie. Ann Sothern as Maisie is just an incredibly likable, enjoyable, fun, energetic character that it doesn't matter that some of the plots are weak or some of the stories don't make a lot of sense or whatever. You're not there for that. You're there to see her. And what an underrated talent. She's not one that pops up a lot when people talk about, great stars of the golden age, but just based on these films alone. And she did dramatic work too. Man, she was an incredibly talented performer, a good singer, decent dancer. Very gifted with comic timing. The writing of the dialogue in these was also really good. I can't even recite any of it for you as an example because it's just so rapid fire and so well written. And the key of any good comedian, especially of that time, was making these carefully plotted out lines sound natural, at least natural for the time. And she did it so well. Here's another thing I gotta say, and this is gonna sound weird, but I have to point it out, especially these days with, we talk a lot about body image and whatnot. And I know that, the perception of beauty now is very different from the perception of beauty then, but something I really like about Ann Southern and the Maisie character is Maisie is not a stick. She is a full-figured girl. She's got wider hips, she's got thicker legs, but she's still beautiful. It's not that it doesn't matter. I wish we could go back to that a little bit. But yeah, it is the drive of the character that makes you come back for more and makes you come back for 10 movies. Here's something else about these films. So these films were very light. I call them popcorn movies because the original ones, the first 3 or 4, an hour, 15 minutes maybe. I've been watching these movies in between all of the other movies I've been reviewing so far for this segment. Because you can pop them out real fast. They're fun, they're enjoyable. So they're light. That was what they were supposed to be, lighter films. But here's something that struck me as interesting is that looking at these movies, they were not afraid, especially even in the earlier ones, and they did it even in the later ones, to handle some pretty dark subject matter. They fucking went there, and it's kind of jarring. In Maisie Gets Her Man and Gold Rush Maisie, they are very serious about the depression. Gold Rush Maisie is about her joining up with the Jodes, essentially, farmers who've been forced off of their farms. And not making fun of them, but just seeing the desperation of those people. Maisie Gets Her Man, which is a couple years later, they're still showing the effects. She's working in a hotel, and there are these guys sleeping in the phone booths. And she says, what's going on there? Of course, she says it in a snappy way. And the guy says, they have no home. They have nowhere else to go. So if someone calls with a job, this is the only place where they can be reached. So they're sleeping in the phone booths in case someone calls them with a job. And it's a comedy, but you're like, oh, crap. In 2 of these movies, the very first one and the fourth, in Maisie and then Maisie Was a Lady, characters attempt, and in the first one, actually succeed in committing suicide. You're like, fuck, where did that come from? You're enjoying, ha ha ha. That Maisie, she sure is funny trying to be a maid in, high society. Ha ha. Oh shit, that girl overdosed. So these movies, and I give them a lot of credit for that, is these movies did not have a problem dropping real life and real life situations on the characters. I think that's another thing I really like about these, and why I like watching them as a series, almost like a TV series, as opposed to individual movies. Because of the time period in which they were made, again, 1939 to 1947, it is literally like a timeline of pre-war, war, post-war. You can see the character going through what the country was going through at the time. In whatever situation they were in. Like I said, 2 of them dealt with the Depression. One's like a Swing Shift Maisie and Maisie Goes to Reno, are both during the war, and then Up Goes Maisie and Undercover Maisie, the last 2 of the series, are post-war. And, in those, she's dealing with, Up Goes Maisie starts with her looking for a job after she's done working in, the airplane factories, and and deals with it in a comic way, but is dealing with, a woman trying to find work and be taken seriously and not just be there as an object for the boss to chase around the desk. So, yeah. Here's something weird, one thing you have a hard time turning off when you watch movies these days is looking at films from the past and not seeing them through the eye of a modern viewer. What do I mean by that? Well, again, these are all standalone movies. They are not meant to be taken as a comprehensive series. They're not the Marvel universe, is what I'm saying. They're more akin, think of it as the original Indiana Jones movies. You don't have to see, or the original James Bond films. You don't have to see any of the previous to enjoy the one you're watching. And that was very much the code back then, because they didn't have streaming, DVD, home video, anything like that. So they didn't think, anyone was ever going to see these movies again outside of the theater. So they didn't worry too much about that. There weren't going to be nerds on the Maisie forum, talking about continuity errors and whatnot. So there's no continuity between the films, which when you watch them kind of back to back like I do, it does get a little annoying, because because they kind of like, a British TV series, they don't know which series is going to be the last, so they just kind of wrap everything up each year. They always wanted to end with Maisie in a relationship and engaged. So it couldn't just be that she got her man. It had to be they were planning the wedding. Or they were, they have to say, we're going to get engaged. So in each one of these, Maisie ends the previous film engaged. But when we rejoin her for the next one, she is single somewhere else with no explanation as to what happened to the previous guy and how she ended up here. And again, that's not like a deal breaker. But still, you've got to think, again, these movies were very popular. They were pumping them out one a year, so they knew they had a fan base. So I kind of imagine that even then the audience was going, well, what happened to the other guy? Only once did they show a sign of continuity. In Swing Shift Maisie, she dates a pilot. That's the guy she ends up with in the end. And then in Up Goes Maisie, when she's having a conversation with her, or not Up Goes Maisie, Maisie Goes to Reno is the next one. When she's having a conversation with her new love interest, she says, well, there was a guy, a pilot, but basically she says that he left her for some chick down in Dallas. So we at least get some kind of explanation. So yeah, that's weird, especially like in the very first one. Not only is she going to get married to the guy, but she inherits a ranch and all of this money. So you're wondering, when we come to Congo Maisie, how'd you lose all that money? Not just the guy, how'd you lose all the money? I also don't think that if you watch these films, I don't think there's a great deal of team this guy or team that guy. All of her boyfriends are pretty interchangeable. I was thinking of that as I was watching this. Who do I think the one she should have ended up with was? And they're all pretty dull, I'll be honest. And they're all pretty samey. So yeah. So out of these 10, what are the best? Well, that's a hard question to ask. Because they're all very similar, but the ones that stick out to me, Swing Shift Maisie is the first one I ever saw. So I have a kind of place in my heart for that one, even though objectively I don't think it's the best of the series. Mainly because just the side story. The story of that one is her and this other girl are friends with the pilot, and he's going to marry the other girl, but it turns out the other girl's a con artist and all this, and Maisie has to stop her. The reason that one just doesn't hold up as well is, the other girl, the actor, is just, boy, she's bad, and you can just tell from the off she's a bitch, But Swing Shift Maisie was the first one I saw. I really like Undercover Maisie, just because I also like the crime dramas. Gold Rush Maisie, which I mentioned earlier, is a standout, and I think because it's one that really breaks the mold. Not only is it a little heavier, again, she teams up with a family that's lost everything and is traveling, basically following the work wherever they can. Again, the Jodes, essentially. But it's the one where she doesn't end up with a guy in the end. There is a guy that she has the sparring matches with and all that, but they don't end up together. There's not a romance. So that's interesting. She leaves in the end and is driving off by herself. So it's a very big departure from the rest of the series. So that one sticks out to me. I also really liked Maisie Was a Lady, where she's the maid, and she's a maid in this house where the daughter is engaged to a guy who's a heel. He's just trying to marry her for her money. The son is an alcoholic. The father is, MIA. And Maisie is just basically, she's not trying to put this family back together. She just tells them all off, and it's kind of fun to watch. But yeah, they're all kind of fun. I also like Ringside Maisie. That's another one that dealt with some dark issues, where she's friends with a boxer and he gets beaten up so bad that he goes blind. It's like, of course, everything has a happy ending, but like they went there with the emotion, and it's hard to watch because you're not expecting that from these. Weaker entries in the series. Maisie Gets Her Man it's not bad, but it co-stars Red Skeleton, who was a comedian at the time, and a good comedian. I've seen him in other things, but in this one, boy, he is just obnoxious and annoying, and he kind of ruins the film. The one that's kind of the hardest to watch, of course, is Congo Maisie, the second film in the series. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I will say that, fill in the blanks yourself. It's a movie called Congo Maisie, made in the 40s. So you can just imagine the portrayal of black people in that film. Now, to be fair, several of the films have that, that black character or caricature in them. Big eyes and oh, Lord of mercy, Miss Maisie. And you cringe. You physically cringe. But you can kind of put a Band-Aid on it with it was that time, it was that place. Hattie McDaniel always said, I'd rather play a maid than be one. So you can kind of swallow it and get through it for those little ones. This one, not so much. You can't ever get away from it, which is sad because the story is actually quite good. Again, she comes across a doctor in the Congo who's given up medicine, and he goes back to a research facility he used to work at, and the other doctor's there, and he has his appendix bursts, and the first doctor has to regain his love of medicine to save him and all that. So it's a good story, but boy howdy, it is so. I had a real hard time getting through it. I had to fast forward through a lot of it. And again, you can only go, it was that time, it was that place for so long before you just go, okay, we just can't do this. So the story was still good. Political correctness, not so much. But on the whole, these are 10 really fun, really entertaining movies. A bit more socially responsible than you would attribute to them. And starring an actor who I think deserves more praise, and a series that I think deserves some more viewers. TCM, Turner Classic Movies, will occasionally run them. That's where I first encountered them. You really got to look. But if you can, give the Maisie series a try. And it doesn't matter kind of where you start. Just pick one and go. Fun films, fun time. And don't we need a little bit more of that these days? So, whew, that was a long series, and I got one more series I'm going to try to get through for y'all. So, I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. I hope everyone is powering through. We're going to get through this together, folks. So, until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.